I've been developing professionally for about a decade now, mainly using .NET technologies. So I think there's an unspoken set of rules, developer rules, that we all follow. A sort of developer code that we all try to adhere to. You can sort of think of it as the developer fight club. We all know not to push to production on a Friday, and that they're not bugs, they're features. We all know to code as if the guy that's maintaining it is a psychopath that knows where you live. And most importantly, we know that tabs are better than spaces. Now, I'm not here to judge or complain about that developer. It's a light-hearted look at traits I've encountered working with a number of developers in my time. I've always found that there's one developer that doesn't adhere to those rules. You can see that developer here, sat in the midst of everything burning down. That developer is oblivious to it all. Let's look at some of those things that that developer shouldn't do. Or should do, rather. That developer should ask for help. They'll spend days on a piece of code, which, with a bit of advice, could have been making progress on much faster. There's no shame in it. We all don't know what we don't know. Occasionally, they may, but that developer is not great at listening. During that developer's interview, I asked them, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?" That developer replied, "My biggest weakness is that I don't listen." That developer asks your opinion about how you should go about something, how about you should solve a certain problem, but they don't listen to a word of it. You know what? We should probably give that developer a name. Let's call them Joe.
We have two Joes.
Okay. So Joe doesn't like change. Joe still writes everything using web forms and WCF. We heard from Callum earlier, describing functional programming and immutability. Well, Joe doesn't like functional programming. Joe will still only copy and paste items using their mouse, and will save their code going through the menus. But change is inevitable, except from vending machines. Yeah. On the other hand, that developer maybe does like change. They want all the change. They want all the change that they can get their hands on. They want to use all the latest frameworks and tools. So when Joe first started, he said, he looked at our solution and said, "Oh no, the majority of this isn't written in VB, is it?" That dev had a suggestion. How about we rewrite everything in C#? Of course, why not? Let's ignore any new requirements and convert all of our code for no real value. Because if we're all to use and follow the latest technologies, we'd all be specialists in Flash. Maybe some of you are. And if you're even more unfortunate, potentially Silverlight. So my studies for an NCP in .NET 4 taught me all about master pages. Yeah, it was a bit of a waste of time. And all of those JavaScript technologies before Angular, React, and Vue came about haven't been much use either. So sometimes it's best to let the dust settle and find the best tool for the job. Which can be difficult, though, because Joe doesn't like to think for themselves. Their idioms come from Stack Overflow questions, or the first person they can find on Twitter. Now, Dan Abramoff is a really talented guy that actually started out as a VB developer and now is one of the ambassadors of the React community, having co-developed Redux. So he obviously knows quite a lot about technology as a whole, and is not a bad person to sort of understand. But the problem with that is other developers will change their minds. Now, there's a fundamental change in our technology and principles every couple of years, and what may have been true yesterday is probably not today. So, if you don't know what introspection is, you need to take a long, hard look at yourselves. But don't always focus too hard on the problem at hand, because if Joe was to take a moment, take a step back and look at the problem as a whole, they might find an easier solution. And Joe will always say that they'll fix things later. Just before going on holiday for 3 weeks, they decide it's the right time to merge up some changes they've been working on for the past 6 months. When Joe was asked how many developers it takes to screw in a light bulb, they replied, "Are you kidding me? That's a hardware problem." So Joe has had their code review, the pull requests have signed off. Is it their job to make sure it works somewhere else other than their machine? Because to tell somebody that they are wrong is called criticism. But doing so officially in our industry is called testing. But Joe doesn't like criticism, and Joe doesn't like testing. Joe says, why? Why write unit tests? It's not worth the effort. I never make mistakes. Anyway, what are testers for anyway? And can we not just let the clients do that? So maybe Joe does write unit tests, but how about integration tests? Because in first glance, everything works fine. But when you put all these different things together, you kind of see a slightly different problem. And what are the chances that Joe will clean up the code that he's worked on but no one else can understand, or extend, or maintain? Add it to the backlog, they say. I'll tackle it next time. Joe just keeps on piling code onto that wagon. But Joe does love open source software though. It's free! They do get really irritated though when that project doesn't do the exact thing that they're after. They submit an issue, but no one comes back to them even the next day. You know, it's okay to submit an issue, but Joe never thinks that they should contribute themselves. Comments? Nope, not from you guys in the code. So Joe writes very long, complicated software, and guess what? Without any comments. So you can see that that developer can take on many guises. Now, this has clearly been a bit of fun. Joe doesn't exist, and it's rare that any developers will contain any, if many, or any, if any of these traits. But as fellow professionals, it's down to us to coach and encourage one another to become better and avoid any substandard behaviors. Now, as developers, we no longer work independently on tasks with complete specs. We are agile. We work collectively as a team across multiple departments. So being aware of ourselves and how best to interact is crucial in building the best environment that we can. So it's down to all of us. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your night.